Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another Board Explorer Live. I'm Richard Vobes, and I am a little bit early. I realise that, but I've got here nice and early and set myself up. And I was just watching a YouTube video, a review on the GoPro 9, which I probably won't be buying. And I've got a couple of GoPros which I may use in the films. I've been out again, and I have. We're reading The Lure of Sussex, as you know, and this is what this little live feature is about. I'd always say this at the beginning, just in case people come along and think, oh, is this just like him talking about random stuff like many people do when they do a live, or is it actually what he says on his description? Yeah, it is. And I went to Bury, and if you remember, in the last chapter, before we got onto the windmills, which we're going to continue with, he goes to Bury, which is in West Sussex, and I thought that would be a good place to go for a video. And so he says here, a pleasant approach to Bury is by footpath and ferry from Amberley. Well, I couldn't do that approach because the ferry no longer exists, and you'd be stuck on the other side of the river. Were unable to get across, so I actually drove into Bury, parked up near the church, and walked down to the river and started from there. And he talks about the dog and duck. I don't know if you remember that. Well, the couple that ran that ended up in a bit of a difficult situation because the husband murdered the wife in recent times. And it's no longer the Black Dog and Duck, it's now a private house. But anyway, so that was interesting. A local told me about that. I didn't know about it, but it's in the paper and in the papers about 7 or 8 years ago. And the lovely Julia has indeed done some research on it, and I think she's going to send me the link so I can put that in so people can read that. Anyway, good afternoon. Welcome, lovely Julia. TurboStream, been arranging with Adrian to visit him on my trip up to Wales and to see Fran and Rich on floating our boat. So we're going to do a little tiny walk and do a video, I imagine, if that's all right, on Sunday. John F., hello to you. John Morris, good afternoon from North Wales. Ah, how lovely. Mike Stevens, good afternoon, gentle folks. Mike Stevens says, I wonder if that John Goldsworthy in the photograph is the famous artist. John Goldsworthy, as in the author, is he an artist as well? In the photograph of the book, I think he gives... I didn't realise, but yeah, John Goldsworthy, in his West Sussex residence at Bury, sitting there with his dog. You can't see that so well on that camera because the focus is fixed, but I can probably get it there. That's John Goldsworthy. Goldsworthy? Galsworthy? I don't know how you pronounce his name. Anyway, that's him there with his dog, looking jolly. So he may be the same person. Good afternoon to Ed Loud, to Diana Rolfe. Hello, Richard and chat. Nice to see you. To Billabong O'Neill. Good afternoon, Earthlings. Afternoon. Are you circling the planet? TurboStream says, I, Bury int South. It is in South indeed, not the other one. Justin Jones, hello to you. Nice to see you. TurboStream says, looking forward to the Vobes visitation en route. Vobes on the road. Yes, Vobes on the road. And Mike Stevens says, what does int South mean? Int South? It's int South, isn't it? Know what I mean? It's not up north. And Nigel Sedler says, hello. Hello, Nigel. Thank you for the email. And the stuff. I can't remember if I was answering some emails. I can't remember now if I answered yours, but thank you for the photos. And Julia tells me you've shoved it in the group as well, which is brilliant. Just as it should be. So that's that. We'll get on with the reading in a second. I don't know if Elaine Brazier watches these readings. She's probably working in the day, but she may well watch at a different time, or she may watch live. But I am in receipt of this, which she sent me, very kind. Village Life by Norman Weimer. Weimer? I imagine it's Weimer. Published in 1951. In this colourful and attractive work, Mr. Weimer traces the origins of village life in prehistoric times and paints a clear picture of the medieval scene with the nominal ownership of all English lands held between the king and the church. And I think he comes up to date with it. There's some beautiful pictures of, again, sort of country life. Let's see if the webcam would be better for that. Country life and people and all that sort of stuff. I absolutely adore these type of books that talk about country life. I'm reading currently something called The Farming Ladder. Here's another beautiful picture. Look, it's got some nice pictures there. Autumn. I'm reading the Farming Ladder, which is a book by George Henderson, who was a farmer who was quoted, met up with Massingham, H.J. Massingham, in the book that we read, The Wisdom of the Fields. I've got some more of Massingham's books as well, just making a collection. I absolutely love it. So if in your meanderings you see any books like this sort of thing and you feel generous, and it's the sort of thing you think, you know, period ones from the 20s, 30s, 40s and 50s, and you want to send it to me, please do. I adore them. So there we are. Right, we will continue. We were with windmills, and the chapter was quite long, and we got through most of it. But I'm thinking, look, we've only got that much left, this much, obviously. So let's press on with this, shall we? So the last time we saw him, he was at Barnham Windmill, which is another windmill. Actually, it would be good for a walk to go to Barnham and have a look at that. It's a black mill, as I remember it. So I could go there tomorrow, depending on the weather. I need to just make a note of what I'm doing in my diary because we're going away on Sunday. But anyway, from Barnham, I walked to Littlehampton, and on my way called on Mr. Boniface, the shepherd at Wick's Farm, Yapton. Yeah, Yapton. I could go through Yapton to Barnham. He was preparing some ewe lambs and ram lambs for a show. They looked very much like Noah's Ark sheep, with perfect flat backs, square heads, and short cube-shaped tails. Mr. Boniface explained that the fashion in the South Downs, i.e. the sheep, like the recent style in art, favoured cubism. Imagine that, cubes for sheep. The tails of the lambs are cut off with a searing iron. Now that does seem a little bit mean and, well, what's the word? Cruel. Cruel. That is very cruel. And I understand that this operation is necessary in order to keep them in a healthy condition. Oh. And also prevent the flies from worrying them. The show lambs each have an aluminium tab fixed on their ear with date of birth and their pedigree number in the South Down flock book. Sometimes the number is tattooed in the ear with indelible ink, as if you're going to do it with non-indelible ink, with watercolour. The number, of course, refers back to the mother of the lamb. How interesting. Climping, a little to the west of Littlehampton, can still claim a fine tower windmill. I wonder if it can. I think, actually, thinking about it, I think there is the remnants. I think it's a private home now. Oh, here we go. But it has been converted into a residence. There you go. The church here should be visited. I have visited Climping Church, I'm sure. Notice the wonderfully carved 13th century chest, which must be contemporary with the foundation of the church. And by the way, I'm just going to interrupt myself yet again. I'm sorry. When I went to Bury today, the church was open. And I went in and filmed a bit. So got that. And it was interesting going into a church. I haven't been to a church since polling, which was about a month ago. And it was just lovely to be able to stand inside a church on my own and just do a bit of filming. I didn't know too much about the Bury Church because I didn't think that I would need to do a lot of research about it because I wasn't really going to go inside it. And then suddenly blow me, yes, you can go in it, and go, oh, all I knew it was 12th century. But anyway, not all of it, of course, it had been adapted. To reach the mill, you take the bridge over the estuary of the Arun at Littlehampton. The osprey here, called the mullet hawk, formerly frequented the river at this spot for the sake of the mullet. That rings a bell. Is Julia, are you still there? I know Julia's coming back from school, but when we went to Arundel, there was a nickname to do with mullet. I remember the chap there who took us around some of the civic buildings said that they had this nickname mullet, and I can't remember exactly what that is, but it does ring a bell. Anyway, the mullet being the fish, I presume. Rustington Mill has been devoured by the sea. I did look at going to Rustington, actually, and I went and had a quick sort of shufty on Google Street View, and I thought, it's so modern. Where is the old part of Rustington? I did look around, and I thought, where's the church? Is there a church at Rustington? Some years ago, the Metropolitan Asylums Board, just what you need to put me in, the Metropolitan Asylums Board purchased the land on which it stood and built a seawall behind it in order to protect their hostel. The old mill gradually crumbled and fell a prey to the ebb and flow of the tides. Gosh. In Sussex, the windmills are of three types: the post and socket, tower, and smock. The post and socket, which is what we saw, and I did the video recently of the one at Ringmer or Glyndebourne, which is the type which was descended to us from the time when windmills were first used in this country, a fact that is demonstrated by the centre post, which in the first place a primitive device, and in the second place a contrivance which was rendered needless as early as 1550, when the Dutch millwright invented the versatile roof, in which the cupula, which carried the wind shaft and sails, could be turned without turning the mill itself. Oh yes, remember yesterday I was talking about Barnum, and I said, oh, I think that's a Dutch cap. Yes, so there we are. It was a Dutch millwright who invented the versatile roof so that we didn't have to have a post mill. I've got it. I say that the post and socket type was rendered obsolete at this date, but England did not take to the new style very promptly, and Sussex, always a gen them newfangled ideas, stuck to the post mill for 300 years after. Good for England. Indeed, Sussex still works one or two post mills in 1928. And in fact, in 2020, we still have Oldlands Mill and Gill Mill, to name but two. Possibly the primitive windmill was built on the prong of a sturdy oak tree in order to obtain ground clearance for the sails, or sweeps as we call them in Sussex, and to catch all the wind which was blowing. And from the growing tree, the idea of a centre post originated. A living oak, cut and trimmed, is said to have formed the centre post of more than one Sussex windmill. The method of turning the post mill on its central column was by pushing the tail beam, a solid timber pole built into the lower beams of the floor, and jutting well out behind. The end of the tail beam almost reached the ground, and so perfectly the mill was balanced on its post that I have seen children playing ride-a-cock horse on one of them, move a mill with little effort. Yes, because the old mill boy or daughter, the miller's daughter or boy or son, could move that mill round, as I explained in the Ringmer video. They could just move it around because basically it's like a gyroscope, isn't it? Smock mills are, I think, of Dutch origin. They form an individual class of their own, having octagonal towers constructed of boarding, and are said to resemble a smock frock in appearance. I think the one at Rottingdean is a smock mill, because that's timber based, and not brick-based and not circular, and it's octagonal, I think. The smock mill has a revolving top, which is moved by ropes, chains, or rear fantail vanes. The Dutch smock mill has a curious squat top, which is fitted with spars by which the miller turns into the wind. Oh, here we go. The Black Mill at Rottingdean, Kingsfold Mill, Chailey Mill, Sheermark Mill, I don't know where that is, but Kingsfold Mill, Chailey Mill, definitely. That's where Jonathan Creek was filmed. Kingsfold Mill. I know Kingsfold, but I don't think the mill is still in existence at Kingsfold. That's on the A24 north of Horsham. Follow the conventional pattern of the smock mill, that type of mill. The tower mill is the ultimate development of the windmill, devoted to the working of grinding flour. It's usually round and built of brick or flint and cement with a veering copula. The one in Barnham is a case in point. The earliest mill towers were probably built in Queen Anne's time. That's I think my son. Is that you, Bill?
Yes.
Hello?
Hello.
Are you all right?
Yeah, doing well, thank you.
Good man. The earliest mill tower mills built in Queen Anne's time, 1702 to 1714. But it is a curious fact that all the London mills, up until 1786, were wooden structures turning on posts. All the London mills were post mills. From a passage in the Ambulator, or A Tour Around London, published circa 1790, it would appear that the first windmill of brick with a movable cap near London was erected in 1786 by Walker and Co. at Hoxton for grinding white lead. White lead? What's white lead when it's at home? It has, opposite the sails, a gallery for turning the whole top, and instead of the usual number of sails, viz. 4, it had 5 of them. Nutbourne Mill and Patcham Mill are 2 good examples of the tower group. Let's go and have a look to see if yes, there's one at Patcham. That's right. I've looked back when I've done a walk up towards the chakra thing, the Indian First World War. The Chattree. You look back from there and you can see Patcham Mill. That's very true. Again, I think that is a domestic house now. Galleried windmills are perhaps the most picturesque. That's with a platform that goes around and a rail to prevent you from falling off. Hare Bellocks Mill at Shipley is a very handsome galleried smock mill. The 2 old drawings, in the 2 old drawings. Oh, here we go. Here is one. Let me read it first, and I'll show you the drawings. In the old drawing of Fishbourne, here reproduced, 2 galleried mills will be noticed. By a strange concurrence of events, I purchased this print in a Brighton bookshop, and shortly afterwards met an ardent windmillion. Love it. I've lost my space. Where is it? Oh, here we are. I met an ardent windmillion who possessed an oak tablet which must formerly have belonged to one of the 2 mills depicted. The following verse were cut on it. This mill your father old hath builded and left you to possess. You must dearly hold to show your worthiness. That's in 1780. I'll read that again now I've read it once. This mill your father old hath builded and left you to possess. You must dearly hold to show your worthiness. The tablet has a note on the back which reads, from Fishbourne Mill, 1860. And here is the picture that he is talking about of the 2 galleried mills. Oh, where's the other mill? There's one mill. Hang on a minute. I'm just looking. That's at Fishbourne. I can only see... Oh, old windmills. There's only one there. Sorry. I left you as stranded. I can only see one mill, which is there. Very odd. Right, well, but before we move on, I'm just going to quickly look at the comments because you've been doing the comments graciously with verve. Let's have a look, focus my eyes on them. Used to like Out of Town by Jack Hargreaves. Oh, that was great, wasn't it? Ed Loud says, not sure what any of that has to do with cubism, rather than they have 3 or 4 tails and multiple angles. Oh, the sheep being cut. Yes, I don't know whether that was a joke. Mike says, TurboStream's talking to Mike. Is Richard late, for I can't see the stream yet? No, I'm here. Haircut unless you come from Arundel. Oh, yes, a mullet. That's right. If you come from Arundel, you're supposed to be a mullet, aren't you? Julia says, people born in Arundel call themselves mullets as the fish. That was the main fare. Apparently their football team is nicknamed the Mullets. Thank you, Julia. Yeah, my memory was just sort of vague. It just sparked a something in there. I still see the Lure of Sussex page and nothing happens. Oh, Mike, I'm so sorry. Arundel has a football team. Reload the stream. I hope you've managed to get on. I think everybody else is there. Need to close it and come back. I did start 13 or more minutes ago now. 20 minutes ago, in fact. Nigel Sadler says, no, he's live. All right, okay, so that's what it is. I had the same issues a few times before. I hope you've managed to get on. A great danger to the old wooden mills was fire. Fire endangered by the stones running dry and throwing off sparks, and fire caused by high winds causing the sails to race and turn the windshaft wheel when the huge wooden brake block was closely applied. We read many records of mills destroyed in this way. There was a flour mill at Deptford belonging to the king, which must have been a windmill, as we may assume from the fact about to be mentioned. On February the 26th, 1761, the wind was so high that it drove the mill with such velocity that it could not be stopped, and taking fire was entirely consumed, together with a large quantity of flour. The six-sailed mill at Kingston Lewis was destroyed by fire, and yet I think in the late 90s, was it? Or early 2000s, it's been rebuilt. I've photographed it recently when I was in Kingston doing about 3 different videos. Fairly recently, we looked back at that, and it now generates its own electricity. So that's interesting. And I did a walk up the path, Old Jugs Lane, in a video about a year ago, past the same said Kingston Mill. When and where the first windmills were introduced into England are questions which remain a puzzle to antiquarians. The mills, which are still standing, do not help towards any answers to these questions, for it is doubtful if any of them date back more than 300 years. Old records, church brasses and other sources carry us beyond the curtain of forgetfulness to mills which were worked in the 12th century, but we can only penetrate further by conjecture. Early references to mills are scanty. Christ, in a familiar denunciation, speaks of millstones. Hotspur, in a speech in Shakespeare's play Henry IV, speaks of living with cheese and garlic in a windmill. In Lynchurch, Norfolk, a brass dated 1349 is engraved with a representation of a curious post windmill. Mary Cranfield, in Sussex Windmills, gives several early records of windmills. In 1190, at, how do you pronounce this, Haberdon, in Suffolk, there was a quarrel between Herbert the Dean and a certain Abbot Sampson, in the course of which a windmill, owned by the said Herbert, was ordered by the abbot to be destroyed. Still, older records concern the sale of a mill that stand at High Salvington, where a windmill has stood down to the present day. There is a black post mill up there which is dated from the 17th century, I think, or is the 1700s. 1734 rings a bell. I did a podcast from there some years ago. Not a video, however. A difficulty arose over the conditions of sale, and it was demanded that the purchaser should not only buy the mill, but the miller and his wife, and should pay a fixed price per head for each of their 6 children. And again, somewhere near Lewes in 1264 stood a windmill which played its part in history. On May the 14th, the day of the Battle of Lewes, when Henry III was defeated by the barons, his younger brother, Richard, King of the Romans, fleeing from his enemies after the battle, took refuge in a windmill. His pursuers, finding the door barred, surrounded the mill with cries of, "Come out, you bad miller! You, forsooth, to turn a wretched mill-master! You, who defy us all so proudly, would have no meaner title than King of the Romans, you called for the August." Not sure what all of that meant, but I made a video about the Battle of Lewes, if you're interested. And I don't know where the windmill was. It's no longer there. In 1618, this mill was... Oh, here we go. In 1618, this mill was still standing, for it is mentioned in a town record as located in St Anne's Parish, Lewes, near the Black Horse Inn. For 300 years, it was known as the Mill of the Hyde, or King Harry's Mill. The first record of a windmill in Sussex, possibly the first record of such a structure in England, concerns the village of Bishopstone near Seaford, where a windmill was erected in 1199. I know that there was a church, there was a sea mill there. It was church property, this windmill, a fact which is not very surprising, for valuable property in those days seemed always to gravitate to the bishop. It was this state of affairs which led a Sussex farmer to protest that the county wanted less fat bishops and more fat pigs. A windmill in the early times must have been a very profitable concern, for in the 14th century we find that whilst pasture land was worth an annual rent of 3d an acre, and arable land 6d an acre, a dwelling house and outbuildings at 5 shillings, a windmill was rated at 15 shillings. The fancy price attached to the early windmill is accounted for by the fact that vassals and tenants were obliged to grind their corn at the manorial or the church mill, for which accommodation they paid a certain value in kind. The vassals and the tenants were always bickered with the miller over the amount of grain put aside for service, and more likely the miller did pilfer a little corn on his own account. Anyway, the miller's flair for roguery has come down the centuries with the well-known nursery rhyme, "Millery, Millery, dusty pole, how many sacks have you stole?" I love that. I didn't know that. Did you know that nursery rhyme? Millery, Millery, dusty pole, how many sacks have you stole? These mills, which claimed the exclusive possession of corn for grinding in a certain district, was called ban mills. In old documents, molendia banali, which I assume is Latin, is it? The origin of the custom was not altogether founded on oppression and injustice. The building of mills was at all times expensive. Yes, and you can imagine, you can see why it was worth 15 shillings or whatever it was in these ancient times, because when you look at how much timber is required in such a place, I mean, they would have been, I suppose, almost like the church, incredibly expensive, and like a skyscraper, the cost of the most expensive house you could think of, or building a factory from scratch, whatever. So, yes, it was always expensive and could be undertaken only by the rich, who, to indemnify themselves for the outlay and the working expense of the mills, compelled the villagers to support them. But to return to the Bishopstone Mill, right, good. Records preserved at Chichester Cathedral state that Seraph II presented it to the church, and from this we may assume that the date of the mill was between 1180 and 1204, the period during which Sefrid held his bishopric. The roundhouse of Kingston Mill has now been converted into a private residence, and you may still see one of the old millstones set up at the entrance as the name tablet. I must go and see if at Kingston Mill. Oh, Kingston. Yes, sorry, I was thinking of Kingsfold. Kingston Mill. Yes, well, you won't see that now because they've rebuilt it. That's right. Your path to it from Lewes. Oh, here we go. Your path to it from Lewes will be the Jugs Road. I just told you I made a video about that on Followed the Jugs Road. Turn your back on Golden Fish on Southover Church. Leave behind the picturesque Anne of Cleves house, and you will arrive at the Swan Inn with its fine iron sign bracket. Yes, that's true. You do. Here you will take the Jugs Road to the Open Downs, a greenway which runs by Kingston Hollow and Newmarket Hill to Brighton. The Jugs were famous fishermen, or so they were facetiously dubbed by the landsmen, and along this track their ponies carried fish to be sold in Lewes. Now it's curious because the other legend that I had was it was the fish wives that did this. The roundhouse is soon reached, and afterwards you may break away from the Jugs Road and follow a footpath to Kingston Village. Here, an Underhill path will lead you to Rodmell, another village holding records of ancient windmills. And I did go in search of the Rodmell windmills, actually. I made a video about that. But it's funny, I made a video about that. I've been making these videos for a while, haven't I? But the way thither is a demonstration of the hundred surprises and variation that 4 miles of downland trackway can spring upon you. The way is tortuous, but do not be discouraged. Stick it, for it is worthwhile. It is a succession of every kind of beautiful track and green way to be found in the county. Foothills, paths, hanging shores, corn paths, cartways, blackberry hedge paths, and always across the Ouse brooks, the breathtaking vista of Mount Caburn and Firle Beacon, frowning over the fields of irredescribable green splashes with the flame of millions of red poppies. Leave the juggernaut. Now, the red poppies, I understood, were grown, this is what I was told, during the First World War to make opium. So presumably that is a leftover from that. Leave the juggernaut junior at home and use those estranged legs of yours for once. No car can take you over this territory. It is nevertheless land that has never surrendered to petrol fumes and dust. I love that. At Rodmell, you will find no windmill today. No, it's true. It was demolished under 20 years ago to supply the oak timber for one of the Tudor cottages in the village. The owner of the cottage pointed with pride to the great centre shaft which had been used as a fireplace beam, a gesture which irritated me sorely, for I thought it a shameful admission. And to that, if the vanished warrior was to be considered not expedient to preserve, at least it would have been wiser to forbear the open display of such a gross error of taste. He didn't like it, did he? I remember well the old mill. It was one of the post and socket breed, and stood on the high ground above the smithy, the mound which it once occupied still being known as Mill Hill. One is not quite sure about the mill folklore which has been woven around the miller of Rodmell and the village smith, as one is not prepared to accept at face value the source of the ram, not the ram, it's just the misprint there. One is not prepared to accept at face value the source of the name Rodmell as the road mill or mill of the road. In regard to the latter point, we are guided by Hadrian Allcroft, who says that the name is really red mould, and so called because of the local plough hands are of a reddish tinge, brown colour. With regard to the miller of Rodmell, or Rodmell, you may read in the church a once upon a time story of a village blacksmith who made a bell for a tower and thus disturbed the repose of the windmiller, who was no lover of church bells, an antipathy which I believe is a very general one. The miller tore his hair and cursed the church, the bell, and the blacksmith in gross and in detail. But finding his curses were powerless to stay the campanological clamour, he sought the assistance of the village witch to have the bell cursed, and with trained skill. The dark woman told the miller that it was easy enough to silence the bell if he would only procure a hair from the tail of the devil to tie onto the clapper. A statement which on the face of it appears rather contradictory. The hair was hard to be gotten, and so the miller resigned himself to the bell music. Years later, on a wintry night when the sleepwalking moon was shrouded with the thick, drifting sea fog, the miller of Rodmell lost his way in the flooded marshes. Only by following the sound of the Rodmell bell did he find the ford which crossed from Asham to the village, and by that means his life was saved. Filled with contrition, he straightway presented the church with a new chime of bells. Such is the story, which, like a curate's egg, seems sound enough in parts, for the ancients of the village still remember sudden floods which inundated the lowlands from Piddinghoe to Lewis, and snatched barns and haystacks from the farmsteads like so many corks. Again, the forge where the bell was made still prospers under Mill Hill, and the ancient bell still hangs in Rodmell Belfry, all of which proves nothing. Let's just pause there for a second whilst I have a glug of water and just get my brain back. Edward Moulding. White lead is a mineral, oh thank you, yes, used as an ingredient used in lead paint and cosmetics in the 16th century. Is it really? Oh, that's interesting. Thank you for that. What ho, says Andrew Norris, just arrived and enlisting as I stew apples from the orchard. Oh, fantastic. How lovely. Turbo says, not many windmills here in the Midlands. The only one I know of is Chesterton Windmill in Warwickshire, not far off the M40. Now, is that because they've just gone? That presumably they must have had mills, or were there more water mills in that district? Nigel Sadler says, which variety of apples are they? Yeah, what are you stewing? The fishermen's wives walked with the donkeys that carried the baskets of fish, says Nigel Sadler. Well, it would be more appropriate that the fishermen were out fishing and the wives were out doing the selling, I presume. So I kind of agree with you, but hey, maybe some did both. These are Granny Smiths, made juice from... I can't read that. My eyes have got... Where I've been looking, now it's all... Idrid recently. Film to follow. Oh, okay. 110 litres from 130 kilos. A good year this year for apples, was it? Blimey. Andrew Norris says, I'm trying that now, not successful, but I'll go and make brandy. Oh, making cider. Oh, I see. Okay, so you're all talking about that. TurboStream, on topic, is saying, I think the mills were water mills, as there are a few rivers here, all long gone now, sadly. It is such a shame. Isn't it such a terrible shame? We are cracking on with this. Right, well, how are we doing? Okay, good. The windmill is also represented in a whimsical carving in Westminster Abbey, a point that has been overlooked by my brother Windmillions. On an oak stall in Henry VII's chapel is a 400-year-old carving of a monkey seated on the steps of a post windmill and another winnowing corn in a basket. Oh, and another monkey winnowing corn in a basket. I've also lately come into the possession of a poem in manuscript written by a country miller, which I think is worthy to be ranked with a poem written by a Sussex miller and preserved by the Sussex Archaeological Society. And here it is. Yes, and wait for me to murder this poem. The whirling mind there we are, mind. The whirling mill goes blithely round. I love to hear its busy sound. I love to mark against the blue its white arms swinging two and two, its dome and shadowy fantail crowned. Its feet are firm in earthen mound, its bulk with oaken beams inbound. It stands erect where all may view the whirling mill. And facing windward straight and true, it does the work it finds to do. The wheat, the barley, sun embrowned, to sweet and snowy meal are ground. And ho! The wind sings blithely through the whirling mill. I could continue producing windmill lore for many pages, but the subject can only be briefly treated in this volume. Besides, a further book on windmills is now nearing completion and will be published under my name in a few months. And he did do that, and if anyone sees it and would care to purchase it for me, it was about 20 quid when I looked. But a fascinating, probably, what's the word? Not a compendium, an authoritative tome. So we move on to another chapter now. I'm going to another glug of water. In Search of Windmills, it's called, by R. Thurston Hopkins, if anyone cares to send me a copy. Smuggling days, this is. Arr, smuggling days, my friend. Arr, shush, when the gentlemen go by. Mike Stevens, oaken beams inbound. Such wonderful words. Right. One thinks of the old-time smugglers with a feeling of sympathy which could never be bestowed upon any other such modern adventurer. One thinks of him as a person delighting in life, who found the contraband a cold thing compared to the fun and adventure of running it by land and sea. He loved his drop of moonshine, smuggled brandy, did the smuggler, but he loved life and humour more. Better than anything, he loved his comrades, and in the whole history of smuggling, his desertion of a wounded comrade is unknown. The pure-bred smuggler was often a popular figure in his native village, and no one would willingly see him taken by the preventative agents. In former times, nearly everyone in the district of Sussex, within reach of the coast, looked upon smuggling as a kind of dashing diversion or sport, which gave a spice of interest to the otherwise monotonous calendar of rural events. Even our old friend, the Reverend W.D. Parish, as he sat in his great dim library at Selmeston, writing his Sussex dictionary, could not help slipping a kindly word here and there for the smugglers. And, oh, tut, he even goes so far as to admit that he allowed his church to be used as a storehouse for contraband, tea, tubs, and silk stockings. Darks is a word used by sailors and smugglers to indicate moonless nights. And at those times when the moon did not shine, the boys were out, all up and down the coast to receive and run any cargoes which were being landed. The Reverend W.D. Parish says, "The labourer was always ready to help whenever the darks favoured a run. The farmer allowed his horses to be borrowed from his stable. The parson, certainly at Selmerston, expressed no surprise at finding tea and tubs buried in the churchyard vaults. The squire asked no questions. The exercise men compounded with the smugglers, and when a difficulty arose as to the price, and hard blows were struck, the doctor bound up the wounds for nothing, and made no inquiry as to the dollops of tea and kegs of French brandy which from time to time were found mysteriously deposited on his doorstep at daybreak. Even the village dogs were well disposed towards the smugglers, refusing to bark when they made their nocturnal visits to inland farms, and children were put to bed with a strict injunction, "Now, mind if you hear the gentleman riding along the lane, don't you go a-peeping out of the window. Just you watch the wall and say nothing." Peeping at the smugglers might lead to their identification and arrest, and so it was looked upon as a heinous offence. An unwritten law of the village in regard to smugglers was always disremember them, or rather to deny their existence. Even the word smuggler, too, was taboo, an unlucky word to speak aloud, and an old Sussexians, if they admitted to some evidence of a force or energy which causes dollops of tea to gravitate to the village grocer and tubs of contraband brandy to assemble in the churchyard vaults, referred vaguely to the gentleman and shrugged their shoulders, and then became remarkably silent. It was the old principle of no name, no pack drill. Kipling, in A Smuggler's Song, as usual, sums up the whole situation in a few vigorous lines. "If you lie awake at midnight and hear a horse's feet, don't go drawing back the blind or looking in the street. Them that asks knows questions, isn't told a lie. Watch the wall, my darling, while the gentlemen go by. 25 ponies trotting through the dark, brandy for the parson, baccy for the clerk, ladies, laces for a lady, letters for a spy, and watch the wall, my darling, when the gentlemen go by. Running round the woodlump, if you chance to find little barrels roped and tarred, all full of brandy wine. Don't you shout to come and look, or take them for your play. Put the brisk wood back again, and they'll be gone the next day." If the spot of smuggling was lucrative, it was also extremely hazardous, and tombstone inscriptions in the Sussex churchyards tell many tales of desperate encounters between the gentlemen and the preventative men. One smuggler shot at sea by a revenue officer, both of them following their vocations at the time, was buried in the churchyard of All Saints, Hastings, in 1783. The defunct smuggler removed from all worldly hatred, thus speaks from his gravestone: "May it be known, though I am clay, a base man took my life away. But freely him I do forgive, and hope in heaven we shall live." Patcham Church also contains a grave to a smuggler, Daniel Scales, who was unfortunately shot November the 7th, 1796. This is a polite version of the affair, for this worthy smuggler was killed in fair fight by a revenue officer. I do not know if the tombstone is now recognisable, but the following inscription was once to be seen on it. Alas, swift flew the fatal lead, which pierced through the young man's head. He instant fell, resigned his breath, and closed his languid eyes in death. All ye who do this stone draw near, O pray let fall the pitying tear. From the sad instance we may all prepare to meet Jehovah's call. About the year 1720, Brighton was very heavily engaged in the smuggling industry. Indeed, fish and contraband were the only staples out of the town at the time. The sea had continuously battered the houses on the shore, and most of the important residents had moved to other towns, leaving property to crumble and go to ruin. The deserted houses soon became infested with smugglers, who welcomed the solitary and ruinous state of the whole seashore and the absence of law and authority. The old inhabitants were a very tough lot, if we may credit Dr. John Burton, writing in 1751, "A village on the sea coast, lying in a valley gradually sloping and yet deep. It is not indeed contemptible. It is not indeed contemptible as to size, for it is thronged with people, though the inhabitants are mostly very needy and wretched in their mode of living, occupied in the employment of fishing, robust in their bodies, laborious, skilled in the nautical crafts, and, as it is said, terrible cheats of the custom-house officers. Departing therefore to the inn, like the heroes of Homer after a battle, so did we perform our part most manfully, and then turn to bed, intending to sleep. But this sweet lulling of the senses was begrudged us by some sailors arriving all night long, and in the middle of their drink, singing out with their barbarous voices, clapping and making all manner of noises. The women also disturbed us, quarrelling and fighting about with their fish. Nor lacked there in the house mud-footed Thesis with her briny friends." Sorry, I didn't read that at all well, but hey-ho. We're coming to close. This goes on for a little bit. Probably a good idea to stop there, because he's going to start another account. Yes, let's stop there. That's fascinating about that. I love absolutely. I've enjoyed that bit, talking about the smugglers and in the windmills. Smuggling days. Ooh, them smuggling days. There was a picture that I went past that I meant to show you, and I will show you. Sorry, I didn't do that. Oh, these are the lanterns. It says here, a smuggler's lantern, used by the little common gang for smuggling, for signalling. Top portion, all clear. Bottom partition, 2 lights, danger. Here is a little lantern with different holes giving different meanings. Fascinating stuff. So we will return. We've got so little to go. We may finish this tomorrow. Let's hope so. Yeah, we might do if we're very lucky, if we crack on with it. So there we go. How about that? That's interesting. The Lure of Sussex. Interesting chap. And I have another book by him. Not the windmill one, but another one. I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head. So there we are. All good stuff. Morton Lewis says he's late. A friend from Serbia is here and we are boozing. Oh, nice. Morton Lewis says we'll set up a crowd fund for the tome. Oh, excellent. There we are. That'd be good. I have never heard the words majestic and alcohol in the same sentence before. I never hope to again. Ah, bless you. Dashing diversion, says Morton Lewis. Yes, we all need a dashing diversion, don't we? Sounds like you're having one at the moment. A bit of chitter-chatter. Ed Loud says, "Ah, smuggling song I remember well from the misty night I discovered the Vobes." Yes, indeed. There's no better smuggler, I have to say, than Nigel Cooper dressed as a smuggler in the video I made called... What was it called? What was the one... I can't even remember what it was called now. What was the... Ed will remember. What was it? Smuggling on the Romney Marshes or something, I think it was called. See you in 20 minutes, blah, blah, blah. Turbo Streams, you have me looking up at Birmingham Mills now. Excellent. Richard, you've got to see a lantern with a similar use. Yes, I got... Yes, I did. The one I saw was, if I remember rightly, was a circular thing in Rye at the Ypres Castle. I wonder if there's a windmill on Bar Beacon, says Mike Stevens. Smugglers of the Romney Marsh. There we go. Can't even remember my own films. I made so many of them. Brilliant. Well, there we are. That's it for today. No Vogue show tonight. There is a film. So tomorrow, yeah, I've went to Bury to look where the ferry crossing was, the original ferry crossing. And then I went to the church, looked in the church, and I went up to find the pub that he went to have a drink in, the Dog and Duck. But it was actually called the Black Dog and Duck. And I did talk to a woman who sort of pointed to where it was, and she said it was at the end of the road, and she told me where to go. And I went and she said there's builders in there. But when I went there, the original house must be different now. But I'm not 100% convinced. I need to look on old maps to see if the position is correct. But I'm going to go and edit that now. As well as like the essay and all of that. So there'll be that video. Barnum, could go to Barnum tomorrow, not promising anything. So there we go. Anyway, thank you so much. It's all been good fun, hasn't it? Thoroughly enjoyed that. We're looking forward to our Peep Show book, which will start when... yeah, I'm not quite sure. We may have a break because I can't remember how it works out now. Where are we today? We're on the 17, 18, 19, 20. So the 20, 21, 20. Yeah, so then we may start the one the week after next. Then there'll be a break whilst we're on a canal boat, and then we'll carry on it. Something like that, anyway. Andrew Norris says, Richard, you eased a tedious task. Actually, I quite enjoyed chopping up apples. Yeah, take care. Nice to be able to ease your tedious task. And John F says, thank you, Richard. Thank you very much. My pleasure. Take care, everyone. I'll catch up with you tomorrow. Look after yourselves, and thanks again. Bye-bye for now.